Welcome to the Talk Like a Leader podcast, where we explore the mindset, skill set, and habit set of leadership communication. Using these tips, techniques, and tactics, you'll be able to talk like a leader to build better relationships and get more done. Your host is Guy Harris, who has more than 20 years of combined professional and military experience in consulting, coaching, and training in areas like team and interaction dynamics, communication strategies and tactics, as well as emotional intelligence. Take it away, Guy.
Hi, this is Guy Harris. Welcome to the Talk Like a Leader podcast. This week's episode is titled 5 Communication Strategies to Stop Using and What to Do Instead. Now, part of my work involves not just researching and reading and studying better communication and leadership practices, but also observing how people respond to different communication practices and what kind of body language I see, what kind of cooperation I see, what the likelihood of a particular strategy is to either gain cooperation or to invite frustration and irritation and possibly a fight. And there are 5 strategies that I've noticed that we slip into, both in spoken and written communication, that by their nature are either weak in their persuasive power or their clarity of communication, or possibly even aggressive and potentially perceived as judging or critical of the person hearing or receiving the message. And so I'm going to address those today and give a few comments about some of the things I see, observe, about some strategies that can creep into our communication strategies sort of inadvertently. They might be popular ways of saying things or common or natural ways to say things that are frankly not very helpful. So number 1, ASAP or ASAP or as soon as possible. That's a terrible communication strategy. And while there are probably situations where you can use that phrase, maybe in response to a direct question someone asks or something like that, it's a generally bad idea to use ASAP, especially in a first shot at communication. In fact, that's probably a general statement about all 5 of the things I'm going to share today, is that there are times when any of the 5 might be appropriate. So I'm not making a general rule that these should never be part of your communication repertoire. I am suggesting that they're probably not the best place to start. So ASAP, what's wrong with it? Well, let's assume that you're requesting action from another person and you say, I need this ASAP. That sort of implies that they're not going to do it as soon as possible. There's a little bit of a judgment attached to it, a little bit of a blame statement here. Like it's almost as if I don't tell you I need it ASAP, you're not going to take action on it. There's also another problem with it. It's nonspecific. What exactly is ASAP? As soon as possible might be in the next 10 minutes, might be in the next 10 days, might be never. It's not specific. It tends to carry an assumption that the other person won't act on it as quickly as they can. And so it's just generally a bad communication strategy. Number 2, reminding people of their commitment or obligation. For example, you could say, well, like you promised, or as you said in your email, reminding people of their commitment or obligation is almost assuming they don't remember, and that if you don't remind them, they won't live up to it. It carries a little bit of a blame attached to it. Now, what you could do instead is to say what your expectations were. So you might say, well, I was expecting, or I expected, or I hoped, or my understanding was that this is what was going to happen. So it's fair to state your expectation or your desire. It's typically aggressive and a little bit blaming and presumptuous to remind the person of what they promised or what their commitment was. It comes across as a little bit aggressive. Number 3, telling people what they said or meant. For example, you said blank, or you tried to blank, or you didn't tell me. All of those are versions of telling people what they said or didn't say, or what they meant or didn't mean. Instead of saying something more along the lines of, well, here's what I heard, or I interpreted that to mean, or I interpret that to mean. Or you could say, I don't remember hearing. So stating it in terms of what you heard, what you understood, what you didn't hear is fair because you did hear or not understand or interpret however you interpreted it. to imply that they said or didn't say, or to try to tell them what they said or didn't say, is a bit aggressive. So be careful with that. Here's a corollary to that. It shows up more in email than in spoken communication. It comes across like this. Well, you didn't send it to me. Well, the fact is you didn't receive it. We don't know that they didn't send it. So it probably is fair to say, I didn't receive that message, or I didn't receive that email, or I missed that somehow. You don't have it is objective. They didn't send it, probably a little bit judging and blaming. So be really careful with that. Number 4, telling people what you need them to do. It sounds like this. I need you to blank. The truth is, let's be really honest, they don't care. And if I'm putting myself in the receiving end of a I need you to comment, I'm thinking, well, there are things I need too. So the idea is that the phrase is a bit aggressive and it tends to put people on defensive right from the start. Well, is it fair that you have needs and expectations? Of course it is. I'm just going to suggest you phrase it in a little different way. You might say something like, well, here's the problem I'm trying to solve, or could you help me with this issue? Or would it be okay if we try this? Or can we try this approach? Asking, soliciting help, telling people the problem you're trying to solve, probably more effective ways to get to the same idea. Number 5, phrasing things in the negative. Don't, be late, forget, etc. Much better to phrase what your expectations are or what your hopes are or what the parameters are. Frame it in the positive rather than the negative. So let's take the don't be late. It'd be better to say something like this. Well, the meeting is going to start promptly at 9 a.m. Or you could say, instead of don't forget, you could say, please remember. The idea is this. When we phrase things in the negative, it paints the negative picture in people's mind. And frankly, we don't really process negatives all that well. So it's unclear. It's not very specific. It also carries a bit of an assumption that they're going to forget or they're going to be late, as opposed to stating what your clear expectations are or what the parameters for performance are. So number 5, phrasing things in the negative. So that sums it up, the 5 communication strategies to stop using and a brief comment about what to do instead. Let me summarize those, recap them for it. I would suggest the phrase ASAP just basically fall out of your communication repertoire. Unless specifically asked, then you could probably use that in reply to a question. Number 2, reminding people their commitments or obligations. It tends to be aggressive. Number 3, telling people what they said or meant rather than what you heard or understood. Number 4, telling people what you need them to do as opposed to helping people understand the problem you're trying to solve or how they can help. And number 5, phrasing things in the negative rather than phrasing things in the positive. If you can learn how to eliminate those 5 communication strategies from your repertoire, replace them with more positive and inviting and respectful approaches in the future, you can talk like a leader. This has been the Talk Like a Leader podcast. You can listen to this show every week wherever you get your podcast. If you haven't, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Guy Harris, and thanks for listening.